you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, when you hear the online singing, that makes it official. Welcome to the big show. For 16 years and over 2,000 episodes, we'll be bringing the Chris Voss Show. We're just going to keep doing it for another 16 years and 2,000 episodes, or maybe more. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Anyway, guys, as always, refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1, the TikTok, and all those crazy places on the internet. We have an amazing multi-book author on the show today. As always, we just have the most smartest, brightest people on the show. None of them are the host, though, because the host is an idiot. I hear. I don't know. It's rumored that the host is an idiot. Anyway, we have Richard Chizmar. Let me cut that. Richard Chizmar on the show with us today. He has a new book out October 22nd, 2024, called Memorials. And we're going to get into his new book, what the insights are, and everything else. Richard Chizmar is the author of Gwendy's Button Box with Stephen King and A Long December, which was nominated for numerous awards. His fiction has appeared in dozens of publications, including Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine and multiple editions of the year's 25 finest crime and mystery stories. He's won 2 World Fantasy Awards, 4 International Horror Guild Awards, and the HWA's Board of Trustees Award. His third short story collection, A Long December, was recently published to starred reviews in both Kirkus and Booklist, and was featured in Entertainment Weekly. His work has been translated into many languages throughout the world. He's appeared in numerous conferences as writing instructor, guest speaker, panelist, and guest of honor. Welcome to the show, Richard. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you on, sir. Give us your .coms. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
I have a richardchizmar.com, but I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, and whatever the heck it's called now, Twitter, X Twitter.
Bankruptcy next week.
Yeah.
So congratulations on the new book. Give
Thank
us
you.
a 30,000 overview. What's inside?
You know what? It's my campfires. It's my version of a campfire story. It's 3 college students thrown together in a van doing a class project. They're going on a road trip in their old Volkswagen van.
Now, this sounds like a little bit like Amityville Horror. No, it wasn't Amityville Horror. Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Texas Chainsaw. A little bit. You know what? It is a throw. It's set back in 1983. And it is kind of a throwback to the 70s and 80s horror suspense films like, Texas Chainsaw and even going back even further, what is it? Ride with the Devil, the old, I think the guys in the camper and the Loretta Swit and, A Race with the Devil. Yeah, that's what it's called. But yeah, it's just, they're doing a class project for their American Studies class on those roadside memorials that you see that pop up at accident sites and that kind of thing. And what they're doing is they're doing a documentary kind of behind the scenes, the stories behind those memorials and what they call it a study of grief and remembrance. And they want to shoot film and take still photos of various memorials that they run across. And then they want to do some investigative reporting and find out the stories behind them. And in a way, trying to remember the families and the victims. But what happens is they start noticing some disturbing similarities on many of these roadside memorials. And, curiosity gets the best of them. And next thing you know, they're in trouble.
Oh, that's how it always works. It's Fridays around here at the that's wild. So they go on the road trip. I've often wondered about those memorials that are on the side of the road. We have them usually here for highway patrol folks or police officers that maybe died in the duty. You see them along the freeway when you're driving along. And I've often wondered about them. And that's kind of a great premise. What made you come up with the premise for the book?
Pretty much exactly what you just said. I started wondering about them. I at some point I realized that not only do they exist, but they were everywhere.
Yeah.
And I could not think back to for the life of me, I could not think back and try to and kind of find that dividing point when they, when they did not exist and when they did. It just felt like they kind of sprung full bloom, into existence. So I was always intrigued by them. I was always saddened by them. And I did think, pretty much immediately, I thought, wow, there's so many stories behind each one. It was a bicycle accident or an automobile accident, or the setting for violence, that kind of thing. And it just always percolated in my brain. And about 20 years ago, I thought I was going to write it as a script, for a horror movie. And it just never got done. It came time to find an idea for a new book. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to write that sucker before somebody else does. And I had a blast doing it. I mean, it ended up being, this book is probably 40% longer than any book I've ever written. And that was the reason why. I just had a lot of fun doing it.
Now, you said it in 1983. Was there a reason you chose that era?
I had written two books called Chasing. I'd written a book called Chasing the Boogeyman. That was set in 1988, the year I graduated college. And in the case of that book, you say you have the brightest guess, and maybe until me, I had established myself as the main character in this book, and I wrote it in a true crime format. The reason I picked 88 is because that was the year I graduated college, and that's the same thing for this character in the book. It made the writing easy. And with 83, that's the year I graduated from high school. So I knew the music, I knew the geography, I knew the, the trends, the haircuts, that kind of thing. And I wanted to write about that period. I like the fact that technology, was still on the down low. It was like, in fact, it was like the first year that those video cameras, were really readily available, 83 and 84. And so, I wanted the technology to not, present an out for these characters, but I also really wanted the music and the vehicles and just, the political landscape, all of it to be, back in the day.
There was a fabric to the 80s, and I think there's probably maybe a fabric to every age, but maybe I'm partial because, full disclosure, I graduated high school in 1986. I thought it was cool how, I think it's Stranger Things, the show Stranger Things, kind of pays homage to a lot of this stuff, I think, from the 80s. I haven't ever watched the show, but from what I understand, they do that. And I don't know, there's a fabric to it. It was an interesting time. Let's see. It was the worst of times. It was the best of times.
Yeah, you know what? I think you're right. And I think, I have two sons. One is 25, one's 21. With Chasing the Boogeyman, where I wrote about 88, and then I went back further because I wrote about the town in which I grew up in. So they got to hear, about my, and they hear the stories, firsthand or secondhand from my friends all the time, that kind of thing. But they closed the book, and my oldest son, he's like, "You guys were a bunch of street urchins, man. You just ran around."
Whatever you
I'm like,
wanted.
man, that is what it was like in the 70s and the 80s. I'm like, there were no cell phones, so your parents couldn't text you. You left the house. You found your friends wherever you found them, in their front yards, down the street, on the roof of the elementary school, throwing rocks at something, and then you as a pack, you kind of. Traveled to town and you knew the shortcuts, you knew the hiding spots, and you knew a lot of stuff that the grownups didn't. And that appeals to me in my fiction too. Those kind of secrets that you're privy to in your youth that the grownups aren't.
Yeah, and men used to tribe up more back then. I just realized that, all my friends were guys, and we did tribal men stuff together. We go burn something or hunt something, or, sometimes we'd hunt the potguts that were digging in the yard, but yeah, it was a special time, and it's just a great era. What was the joke I had for it? I guess it's lost. But they venture into the Appalachian backwoods. So is there banjos and kayaks?
You know what? There's not. But one character does say that. He says, "I hear one banjo." And
I hear a banjo.
Out there.
Little deliverance homage.
Yeah, that's my punch ending one of the chapters. If I hear one banjo, I'm getting the hell out of there. But yeah, Appalachian. I'm in Maryland. The last two books, Chasing the Boogeyman, Becoming the Boogeyman, were both set in my hometown area in Maryland, which is up north, not far from the Pennsylvania border. So when it came time to write this book, I wanted it to be close to home again, so I could kind of lean on my familiarity. But I didn't want it to be Maryland. I didn't want it to be my hometown. So I picked Pennsylvania. And again, a lot of reviewers have claimed, Chizmar was brilliant for the setting, and I'm just shaking my head thinking, another happy accident if they only knew. But yeah, I have relatives who live, in southern Pennsylvania and throughout. My father was, raised in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, so I kind of know the state, and that's where I put it. And then the more I learned about Appalachia, just everything, the landscape, the geography, the traditions, the people. the more intrigued I was. And yeah, I mean, you talk about a perfect setting for a horror film, or a horror book. And I'm, I mean that respectfully. It's just, everything from some of those, just the idea that hikers could stumble upon an Appalachian, little village of 7 or 8 houses that don't appear on any map and that doesn't even have a name, and that this still occurs is that in itself is enough to make you go, yeah, it's not a place you want to, run into bad things,
Well, out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Out of cell phone range, but they didn't have cell phones back then, so
they still don't want them. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of the Appalachian people, they do shun, modern advancement. It's not a stereotype. In some cases, that's not the case. It's no different than maybe Amish people or whatever. But yeah, it's all intriguing. It's like a stew. You're mixing it together, and if you're a warped guy like me with a big imagination, you can kind of mold a good story out of that.
A story of mystery, thriller, and suspense. I remember the joke I had. Yeah, you were talking about the technology, that they didn't have a lot of back then. And so there was kind of a thing where people actually talked to each other and interacted. If you did the same story today, it would have a cyber truck in it that would break down in the first 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Here would be your dialogue in the novel. Jerry just stared into his phone, and Bob stared into his phone, and then the cyber truck broke down. Yeah. And they couldn't get cell service, and Jerry got angry. The end.
Yeah. After someone posted their whereabouts online, and 50 allies and 50 enemies converged on themselves, and had a battle at the campground where we were. That kind of thing. So yeah, I did. I was able to do away with all that.
Good. It just probably made for a better story. I mean, life was better, I think, without cell phones and social media. Plus, your mom could never find you unless you were within earshot. So you also wrote a book with Stephen King. Tell us a little bit about that. How'd you get that gig? He's written a book or two. He's kind of
the man is still cranking them out. I started way back in college. My senior year, I started a little horror magazine called Cemetery Dance. And 3 years later, I started publishing books under the Cemetery Dance imprint, and the magazine has continued for 35 years. And we're up to, probably almost 600 books that we've published. And my writing really took a back seat, for a couple decades because of all that. But what happened is I sent the very first issue to Steve up in Bangor, Maine. I sent it to his office. I got a nice response back from one of his assistants, and then I just continued to send a copy of everything we did up there. Very quickly, he was supportive of the magazine. He sent us a nice blurb for marketing. Year 3, he sent us a brand new short story to publish, which really helped put us on the map. And then you fast forward about 10 years, he allowed us to do a limited edition of a book called From a Buick 8. A book like that, financially, spiritually, in every way, enriched my company. And then over the next, however many years, we just, there were a lot more projects. And instead of speaking with, Marcia or Julie, his assistants, I was actually speaking directly with Steve. And then some point we started texting, baseball, dogs, family, movies, a ton about movies and books, but, no business. All the business was still done separately. So yeah, it's somewhere in that business relationship, a friendship, was established. And yeah, I mean, many, many years later, I think it was 2016, we were emailing, actually. We weren't texting. We were emailing about collaborations and round robin books where you have 10 different authors, each contributed chapter, that kind of thing. And he just mentioned he had a story called Gwendy's Button Box that he had never been able to finish, and it was sitting on his computer. And I was like, I'd love to read it if you ever get a chance, because that's one of the perks of being friends with Stephen King is you get to read stuff early a lot. He'll send me a manuscript and say, hey, let me know what you think, and that's cool. Cool. In this case, I just kind of wanted to read it, So it showed up the next morning via email, and it said, do with it as you wish. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? Print it out and fold them all up in like little airplanes or what? And then I'm like, he doesn't want me to finish it, does he? And so I emailed him back, and he said, if you think you can, go for it. And that's how it happened. It ended up as a novella. I published the first edition hardcover under my own company, and it became a New York Times bestseller, sold to his mass market publisher, Simon & Schuster, and that led to a couple more, one of which I wrote by myself, but Steve edited because he was busy with another book. And then the last one, Gwendy's Final Task, we wrote together, and that's a full-length novel, and just had the time of my life. So yeah, just very lucky. Just very, got struck by lightning in a good way.
Yeah. Built a great relationship. Relationships are everything. We have so many authors on the show. They would all kill to write with Stephen King.
Yes.
Or
That's the thing.
just have him do the forward, for that matter.
It's ridiculous. People ask me all the time when I do a lot of press for it. That's always the question is, can you pare it down to one word, what it was like? And I'm just like, for this, a kid from Edgewood, Maryland, who used to walk around with Stephen King paperbacks in his back pocket, who decided he wanted to be a writer in 10th grade because he read Stephen King's The Monkey. It's ridiculous. That's my word. It's ridiculous that it's me, and I'm grateful every day for it.
Yeah, wild the journeys life takes us on. Like I said, we've had all the authors of Tom Clancy on, except for Tom Clancy himself, of course, obviously. And we're not that old of a podcast. Maybe he was alive when we were started. I don't know. But we've had all of them on, and a lot of them grew up reading, like you said, the first book of Tom Clancy's and falling in love with him, and then end up writing with him and then writing for him. And it's just a great honor and just amazing, to be able to chosen for stuff like that. That's awesome. What got you into horror? Who hurt you when you were young? How did you grow up, and what influenced you? And
well, I was
it a Stephen King book?
Yeah, I'm the youngest of 5, 3 older sisters. That in some ways
that'll curb you.
There, God bless them. I love them all, and they're wonderful. But 3 older sisters.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, for me, it was just this very organic thing. I did tend to think of the dark side. Like I said, as soon as I saw those memorials, I was thinking kind of about the somber side. And I was always one of those kids who's kind of very observant and aware, I realized that, going to church around the holidays, there are a lot of sad people around here, even though they're singing Christmas carols and it's supposed to be a happy time because I'm going to get, like the Evel Knievel motorcycle kit for Christmas, at least I hope I am. There's a lot of sad faces. And so I always kind of saw that, way before it was probably healthy to see that kind of thing and understand that kind of thing. But it was also just the normal, like I said, organic. Wizard of Oz, back then, no VCRs. You came on once a year. It was a big event. My favorite part, the haunted trees and the flying monkeys, scared me to death. Nightmares. My sister said we're not going to let you watch it next year. Next time it was on, there I am front and center going, come on, give me the flying monkeys.
Give me the flying monkeys.
Chitty Bang Man, man. I'm still scared of that damn kidnapper with the net. So it started that early, and then it just continued. I walk into a comic book store, I wasn't always, I wasn't the kid who was interested in the superheroes. I wanted the Twilight Zone and the Tales from the Crypt.
Oh yeah.
That kind of thing. And then Saturday afternoons, I was an outside kid, wiffle ball, kickball, playing marbles, trading baseball cards, throwing stuff at cars, all that stuff. But 12 noon on Saturday, I was like, see ya. I was back in my house. Creature double feature, 12 to 2 and 2 to 4. Some of the worst movies ever made, but man, I was glued to the television. And so that's it. It's just, That was the path. And then, never really, I wrote a lot of stories when I was younger, monster stories, war stories. Tried to sell them to my friends. They never would buy them. I'm like, it's on sale today for a nickel. I'd get a middle finger and my mom's going to buy it. My mom was my first audience. And then, 10th grade. My English teacher, Richard Gallagher, who I still see and stay in touch with and still thank him regularly, he brought in photocopies of King's story, The Monkey, which appeared in an early magazine, Gallery, as a little chapbook. And God bless him. He broke like 18 different rules, photocopied it, brought it in. And we read it out loud in class. And, typical sophomore high school class, a bunch of jackasses giggling, talking. But by the time we got to the end of that story, the entire class was quiet, scared, captivated, and I just thought to myself, "This is what I want to do." And I had already read a bunch of King by then. It was just kind of a reinforcement, and from that point on, I was like, "Yeah, I want to do this." He actually gets paid to do this, so yeah, that was my path, and it was like I said, it kind of just grew naturally.
That is awesome. What a thing. So what is coming? How many books do you have total so we can get people to go check out your other?
You know what? I'm not even sure. And you know what? Again, if I was smart, I would keep tabs because I get asked that question. But you know what? I didn't start writing novels till I was in my early 50s. I'm 58 now. I was busy with the publishing company. There was like a 10-year period where I wrote a bunch of movies and was fortunate to have some made. That was almost going to be my first comment when you you read my bio, which sounds so impressive. And I was about to say, yeah, but, just to bring me back down to earth, I co-wrote Roadhouse 2, the movie. Oh. And most people's response is there's a Roadhouse 2. And I'm like, exactly. But yeah, so I've done a little bit of everything, and tons of short stories. That's all the collections that came out were very well received. But, you don't make a living wage writing short stories. And just always, the publishing company is what did that. It's what sent my kids through school and paid the mortgage. And then at some point I was just like, it's time to try. And then right around that period is when Steve asked me to write that story. And I was like, what a better launching point. So yeah, I'm I kind of, Gwendy's Button Box kind of helped me become an overnight success to some degree. And then, fortunately I was able to kind of walk the walk and write some decent books myself, and they've continued. The readerships continue to grow. Yeah, awesome. Very, very fortunate.
Kicking ass, taking names. What's the future look like? Anything working on in the future?
Yeah, I'm about a week away. My oldest son, Billy, his writer name is W.H. Chizmar. He's been writing since college. They sent him home from college for COVID way back. And what he did is he sat out by the pond in our side yard and wrote a novel. Then he threw it in a drawer, went back to school, played lacrosse, the whole thing. And he rewrote it probably about a year and a half ago, sold it to a hardcover publisher for a limited edition. And then he recently sold it to a major publisher, which I can't really mention yet because the contract's not signed. But so anyway, he and we wrote a novella way back then called Widow's Point about a haunted lighthouse. Again, we're just playing father and son. We both dabble, so let's have some fun. Published it through my own company, sold a bunch of copies. Reviews were great. Ended up selling it to 4 or 5, overseas countries. And it was made into a movie, which is not a great movie, but it was made into a low budget movie. And we thought that'd be the end of it. We're like, wow, what a great experience. We'll have to do it again sometime. And then we both, over the next year or so, we both kind of came to the understanding that, that story's not done yet. There's more to go. So I pitched my publisher the idea of, hey, let us use this novella as kind of the anchor, like the first 20% of a full-length novel, and we'll do something really scary. We'll do something really creepy about this lighthouse. And they went for it. So we're about a week away from turning that in, and I'm assuming that'll be out sometime next year. And then I'll get to work on the third Boogeyman book. Those books have been good to me. Yeah. It's just, I'm just going to keep writing novels and short stories. My agent asks me all the time, hey, are you interested? Do you want to be on board on this as a scriptwriter maybe? And I'm like, nope, been there, done that. I'm having too much fun, kind of playing in my own sandbox and not having to listen to investors and producers. And
Hollywood types.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep writing, short stories and books and having fun.
It's been wonderful to have you on. Give people the final pitch out as we go out to order up your book, and .coms where people can find you on the interwebs.
Yeah, you can find me, Richard Chizmar. No fancy nicknames for me. Although everybody calls me Chiz, I should probably use that. Yeah, Facebook, Twitter X, and Instagram, and then my website, richardchizmar.com. And come have some fun.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for coming on the show, Richard. We really appreciate it.
Chris, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And please come back for your future books.
I will.
And thanks, Mountains, for tuning in. Order up the book wherever fine books are sold. Stay away from those alleyway bookstores. You might get a tetanus shot you'll need if you step on the wrong thing or get mugged. His book is out October 22nd, 2024, called Memorials. And check out his other fine library that he has there. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss. Chris Voss won the TikTokity and all this crazy place on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. And that should have us out, man.